Hey, you guys. So, the first video on the biogeochemical cycles kind of got cut short, and we ended talking about the first process in the nitrogen cycle, which is nitrogen fixation. Okay, very important process. Just want to summarize it again. It can happen one of three ways, and farmers look at this. One, it can happen physically with a lightning strike, but that's very rare to happen. Two, most popular way is by going through the free nitrogen in the air, going through the nodules in these legume plants or these bean plants where there's bacteria in there that converts that nitrogen to ammonia compounds. But how is the other way, which is our second process here, that we can get those ammonia compounds, which are nitrogen compounds? Ammonia contains nitrogen. Okay. How can we get that into the soil? Well, putting fertilizers down. We can put artificial fertilizers down, like, farmers can buy those fertilizers, very costly, like I said before. Or we can use cow manure, okay? Any kind of manure, actually, any kind of waste product from an animal. When that manure is laid down, bacteria in the soil, so here comes the bacteria again, bacteria in the soil break down that manure or break down those fertilizers and convert that to ammonia compounds. So again, if we look at what farmers could do, they could wait for a lightning strike, not going to happen. Put down fertilizers, very costly. Or plant these legumes every so often where they get two benefits. One, the legume puts the ammonia compounds into the soil, makes the soil richer, right? And two, they get to sell the bean plants and make money that way. So what is this second process here? Well, this is decomposition. Decomposition. But you know how biology likes to use 1,000,001 words? It's also called ammonification. Ammonification. Okay, because we are producing ammonia compounds, and that is another way of getting ammonia compounds into the soil. So, like our yards and stuff, if you're not putting fertilizer down, ammonia compounds, how do they get into our yards? Okay. Are you putting fertilizers down? Like if you have like a really nice lawn, most likely you're putting some sort of fertilizers down because you're not planting legumes. However, some of the grasses that are out in the lawn can actually act like these legumes and have bacteria in the nodules. Okay. But ammonification, getting these ammonia compounds. All right. Process number 3. Okay. Oh, and notice I circled process number 2 because it's bacteria that do it. Well, guess what? Process number 3 is also a biological process because, again, bacteria is doing that. Bacteria seem to be the hero of this cycle. So bacteria, we're going to highlight bacteria. And we should thank bacteria every day for doing this for us. This third process is going to change the ammonia compounds because plants can't absorb them, but they can absorb nitrates and nitrites. Okay, that's what that says here. We need to somehow have these ammonia compounds converted to that, and that's what bacteria does. This is a process called nitrification. Nitrification. And again, bacteria are doing it. This is why I circle it. It's a biological process. Now, then process number 4, where those nitrates and nitrates convert back to the free nitrogen. Well, it makes sense that this is called denitrification. And notice I circled that. But what do you see doing that? Well, actually, there's more bacteria in the soil. So you have these bacteria in the soil that are decomposition bacteria. You have bacteria in these nodules that are nitrogen fixating bacteria. You have bacteria that are nitrifying bacteria, nitrification. And you have bacteria that are denitrifying bacteria, okay? But there's 2 more processes that I want to label here. So I'm going to label this a number 5, this little arrow here. And here we have these nitrates and nitrites going into the roots of the plants. I know what you want to say. It involves a plant. So this number 5, we're going to circle it. But I know what you want to say. You want to say that's like absorption. Well, it would be if it was water. But when it is a nutrient, we call this assimilation. Assimilation. And make sure you know the difference between absorption and assimilation. Assimilation is when any nutrient is going into the roots of a plant. But when it's water, we give it the special name of absorption. Okay. And finally, number 6 here. Number 6, and I'm going to circle it because it involves both the plant and the animal. Okay, number 6 is, we're going to call it ingestion, but we're also going to call it consumption. Okay, again, 2 words that both mean basically eating. Okay, so this is, if we put ourselves in this picture instead of the cow, when we eat plants or we eat animals that have eaten the plants, that's how we get our nitrogen for our proteins and our nucleic acids, our DNA and RNA. Okay, but like we said, who's the real hero of this story here? The bacteria, because we have bacteria that are in the nodules and they do nitrogen fixation. We have bacteria that convert the ammonia compounds to nitrates and nitrites. That's nitrifying. We have bacteria that decompose. That's decomposition bacteria, ammonification. And we have bacteria that put it back into the atmosphere. That's our denitrifying bacteria. So that's the nitrogen cycle. So let's move on to our final cycle, the phosphorus cycle. Okay. And the phosphorus cycle is like one of the weirdest ones because, like, to be honest, it's a real long cycle and it's not like one we pay attention to so much. But let's get started on this and let's see what's physical and what's biological. Because remember, we're talking about those biogeochemical cycles. The chemicals are the actual elements that we're looking at. Remember the CHONP? But what we want to do is we want to look at the processes here and which ones involve living things versus which ones do not involve living things. So we'll start with number 1. Number 1, and I'm not circling it, is called uplift. Okay, and since the arrow is going up, okay, just to get you to know what this picture is all about, these are mountains here. Okay, and so this would be like something coming down off the mountains. Here is a nice lake. Here's a plant. There's my cute little bunny rabbit. And this is like all sediments on the bottom here. So uplift is when like volcanoes happen or hydrothermal vents or earthquakes and stuff. And some of these sediments, or even just like a stirring up, kind of come up from down below. Okay, uplift. It's definitely a physical thing. Number two, this is when not only the water is running off, and we're going to call it runoff, but in that runoff is also a lot of sediments and stuff. Okay, number 3, right, where those sediments, those dissolved substances that are in the water, this is like a lake here, start seeping into the soil. It'd be nice to call it seeping, but instead we call it leaching. It leaches into the soil. So some of those sediments leach in. But some of those sediments just settle out. So number 4 here, where they just settle onto the bottom, that's sedimentation. Notice, all of these things are physical things so far. Okay, no living thing has to be involved in this. But now we're on to the biological things. So number 5, we're going to circle that. Here, we're saying the phosphates that have seeped into the soil now are going to be absorbed by the roots. Do we call it absorption, though? Think about up in the nitrogen cycle. When we said it was some sort of nutrient going into the roots of the plants, we called it assimilation. Well, same thing down here. This is assimilation because it's not water that's going into the roots of the plants. It's some sort of nutrient, okay? Number 6, if that plant or that animal dies, it will decompose and some of those phosphates will get into the soil that way. So this is decomposition. Why did I circle that? I circled it because it's biological, but we see the plant and the animal. Is it because the plant and the animal are doing the decomposition? No, it's bacteria again, okay? Bacteria is actually doing the decomposition. Over here with assimilation, it's the plant doing the assimilation. But here, when that animal and that plant dies, it's bacteria and other fungi that are doing the decomposition. And finally, number 7, let's just call it consumption, or eating or ingestion, and that is being done by the animal, and that's why it's biological. Okay, so that's the phosphorus cycle. It's a very long cycle, but we need our phosphorus. So I want to sum up a few things here. First, I want to mention the CHOMP. CHONP again. Just like we said over in the water cycle, we get our hydrogen and oxygen from water. Carbon cycle gives us the carbon, the nitrogen, phosphorus, the phosphorus. These are the 5 elements that are very important to living things. There's one other thing I want to mention, and it's like a crazy long word. Maybe you've heard of it before. It's called I've got an R in there. Eutrophication. Eutrophication. Make sure you write down that word. Eutrophication is kind of like, I always say, it's too much of a good thing. Here's what happens. You get too much nutrients. Too much nutrients. And you usually see eutrophication happen in like a pond or a lake or something, especially one that's like landlocked, okay? Too much nutrients. So when runoff happens and all these nutrients are going into the pond, the nutrients cause too much algae growth. Okay, so when we have too much nutrients, we get a lot of algae growing over this. And then what does that do? That causes less available oxygen. Okay, it literally smothers the pond. And I always think of golf courses. A lot of times on golf courses, they'll have these little ponds that are landlocked, no streams are going into them and all. And golf courses will sometimes throw like chlorine in there because they'll try and cut down on the algae growth and all. And it doesn't make like a big difference because they just want it to be aesthetically pleasing and stuff. They don't want these big algae ponds like growing in there and stuff. However, if they have a stream that feeds into it or feeds out of it, then they're not going to have that algae growth. And the algae will start to rot as well. And it just really causes a problem. And if you had any fish that were living in there, trust me, they're not going to be able to survive. They're definitely going to die because of the less available oxygen. All right. So that's it for our 4 biogeochemical cycles. Again, if we look back on what we've done the water cycle, we've done the carbon cycle. Okay. We've done the nitrogen cycle and we've done the phosphorus cycle. And it's all as a matter of how like our environment cycles these elements around, these nutrients around, because we need CHONP, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus for living things. Okay. And this is how we get it. All right. And that's it.